So I am Dr. Felice Gersh, and I have a few disclosures. I am a medical advisor and speaker for the following companies: L Nutra, and the Cleveland Heart Lab, and Pure Encapsulations. Those are my disclosures. Well, from the get-go, it became clear that this is a very fun-loving group. So let's continue with the fun. So who here has ever seen or heard of the show called the Shark Tank? Okay, so all right, you are the venture capitalists, and I am the person coming to plead my case to see if you will fund my new venture here, okay? So at the end, we'll take a vote to see if I get the loot or you send me off on my way to try to find some other avenue to be successful. So what if I told you, okay, that I would love for you to invest in my new magic potion? This potion holds the promise of longevity and disease-free aging, where you have no metabolic issues, no autoimmunity, no cognitive impairment, lots of energy. Does this sound like a billion-dollar potion?
Yes.
Okay, so let's see if you'll invest in my company. Okay, so I am standing in front of the slide. So we
Let me
won't
take
do-
a picture of you in front of the
Oh,
slide.
okay.
Okay.
All right. Any other photo moments here? I want to prove to my husband I was here, because, Okay, so my wonderful potion involves, of course, fasting of a special sort. So the first question is, if I'm going to sell my potion, is it worthwhile to even treat a natural condition called aging? Who would like to live, my investor potential group here, who would like to live without any disabilities to age 70? Raise your hand. Who would like to go to age 80? Remember, no disability. You can dance, you can travel. Who wants to get to 90? How about 100? How about, I think right now the end of the road is about 120. Not too many, sure. You have to have a lot of money saved. But you guys are so rich. You're the venture capitalists. So you guys can afford to live to that. So the question is, longevity without health span. You know the word health span? It means that you're healthy. Because who wants to live to be really old, drooling, being fed with no awareness? Not a hand will be raised. So we want to be vibrant, we want to be healthy. So is it worth treating aging, or are we just going to create a world of disabled people? That is, of course, not the goal. Because we don't want to extend lifespans, so we have to care for more people with Alzheimer's or advanced cardiovascular disease, so they're all cardiac cripples, right? So we want to have health span, and it would be nice to have longevity as well. So what would happen if we could actually cure cancer, heart disease, stroke, and diabetes? How much more time could we get? About 13 years. Well, that doesn't sound too bad. I mean, 13 years of good life is good. But what if we could actually alter the very foundations of the aging process? We could potentially add 30 years of good life. So now am I getting your attention? You're thinking, I'm going to put money into this venture. So we know a lot about other creatures. And fortunately, there are things that are called conserved genes. So that means that we have much more in common with yeast than we ever usually think about. So looking at these other living creatures and looking at some of their genetic, when they have sort of genetically modified so that they have not proper functioning of things like growth hormone, what they found is that the runt of the litter, so to speak, the little ones, they did much better than the big ones, right? So it turns out that there are certain pathways in the body that if once you become an adult, once you're done growing, if you can slow the proliferation, if you can slow that perpetual onslaught of growth and proliferation, you can extend lifespan. And that's what they found in these animal models. So what about in humans? What they found is that if you found humans, and they did find a group of humans in Ecuador, and in Ecuador, what they found was that this group of humans that had growth hormone receptor malfunction. So you could pour growth hormone into them, they would not grow, they were little, and they could not proliferate, because growth hormone is about proliferation. So what they found, let me put this all up here, is that in the relatives of the people, not the ones with the growth hormone problem in their receptor, but their relatives had significant amounts of cancer. But the ones without the growth hormone receptor function had almost none. And then if you looked at obesity, now this is sort of interesting. It turns out that the little people had a lot of obesity, but unlike their relatives, they had no diabetes. So just being chubby did not make them diabetic. So this is a unique human model that can sort of be a good mirror of those animal creatures where it showed that when you knock out the receptor for growth hormone, they lived longer. So here are the little people in Ecuador. They did not get cancer, hardly ever. They did not get diabetes. They did not get the cardiometabolic disorders, but they tended to be heavy. So what are we facing now in the US? I know you all know this, right? We have an epidemic of obesity, cardiovascular, metabolic disorder, and they're predicting an onslaught from the baby boomers and thereafter of dementia. I don't think we have enough taxpayers to support what may be coming in terms of disability among the elderly. And there's lots of people aging. Who here has an elderly relative who is disabled in some fashion or has had one? Almost everyone. And that's not our goal, is to have a lot of old disabled people. Who knows of a really old person? Well, let me ask you this. Who in this room has had a relative live past the age of 80 and still have full cognitive function, past the age of 80? How about past the age of 90? How about, great, you guys have good genes. What about past 95? That's still pretty good. So I lost my dad a couple of years ago at 98, and he gave me good advice the day he died. He was still completely cognitively, there. And it can happen, but that's not the vast majority of people who are aging. Most of them are among the group that is having cardiometabolic disorders and cognitive disorders as they age. So let's think about how we evolved. This is all about ancestral medicine. Way back, I don't know how far back you have to go. It doesn't have to be incredibly far, but let's just say 20,000 years ago, 15,000 years ago, humans did not have abundant food. Who here has been to a mall? Has anyone been to a mall? And you walk around the mall, there's a lot of food, right? Has anyone been in any city where they couldn't find any place to eat? It's like, it's pretty hard not to eat, right? It's like food everywhere. Of course, what is food? I actually had to go to dictionary.com to figure out what is food. And it did say that to qualify as food, it has to contain something amazing called nutrients. But food in our country has lost its way, so to speak, right? People tend to eat food, or they call it food, but it has no nutrients. That's one of our big problems. And therefore, people are very nutrient deficient. So we want to make sure people get plenty of nutrients, so we have to redefine the purpose of food. It's for pleasure and it is for survival. It is not for pure recreational use, right? So we want to change about food. So when people came on this planet and evolved as humans, they certainly were not eating just for recreation. They ate for survival. So we have to think of food as for survival, and humans did not have constant eating. So how did it come to pass that Homo sapiens are still here and the Neanderthals are gone? Well, the anthropologists have looked at it, and the Neanderthals had bigger heads. Neanderthals were smarter than Homo sapiens, but they became extinct while we Homo sapiens are still here. Why is that? Because no matter how smart you are, if you don't have food, it doesn't matter. It turned out that Homo sapiens are better at famines than the Neanderthals were. And there were periods of great famine. And the Homo sapiens, we did not become extinct. And the very smart, smarter than us Neanderthals couldn't make it because their bodies were not able to evolve to adapt to famines. And I'm sure you've all heard that humans are amazing at famines. Who's ever seen those horrific pictures of people coming out of prisoner of war camps or concentration camps where they were like walking skeletons? And you think, how could they be alive? Because we are a very adaptive group. Homo sapiens can adapt to many different diets and to lack of food. And we actually adapted to not be constantly eating. So we don't want to feed constantly. That is going to be very big in terms of selling you my potion, is that you do not eat all the time. Periods of fasting, they were not intentional, of course, but they came into almost everyone's life at some point. And I don't know if you think about this, but humans are rhythmic. Humans have many, we'll talk about like females, which is my specialty. Women have circadian rhythms, they have lunar rhythms, they have seasonal rhythms. Humans evolved to eat and get fatter in the summer, kind of like bears, but we don't hibernate, and then to lose a lot of it in the winter. So we are seasonal as well. We were never designed for constant, inexorable feeding. So it turns out that there are these pathways in the body, the IGF-1 and the mTOR, because I say mTOR because we're mammalian, those are triggered by glucose. And then there's the PKA signaling pathway that is triggered by protein. And these are triggered for growth. Now, of course, we need some growth. We need balance. We have to be balanced between being anabolic and catabolic, right? We don't want only one or the other. We have, for example, the autonomic nervous system. If we were only parasympathetic, we would be like in a comatose state all the time, right? We wouldn't get much done. If we're always sympathetic, which too many of us are, way too sympathetic, but not in the sense of sympathy, we're like upregulated with our tone of our arteries and so on. Then we have too much stress, rapid heartbeat. Like we said, people should not have fast heartbeat all the time, but we don't want a heartbeat of 30 either, right? So we need balance. It turns out that these pathways help us with balance, but if we feed all the time, these pathways are always upregulated. That is not balance. So it turns out we've got to downregulate these growth pathways on a regular basis in order for us to actually be healthy. So this is where it's at. When you downregulate these proliferative growth pathways, we get increased cellular maintenance and protection, increased activation of the stress resistance pathways, removal and replacement of damaged cells. Think of like cancer cells creating self-suicide, self-programmed apoptosis, and reduction of inflammation. Inflammation from many causes is the underlying next layer of the onion, right? That causes all sorts of problems in our body. Inflammation that's chronic leads to chronic illness. So it turns out this already came up, right? If you eat a lot of carbs, you'll get sleepy, right? Whoever had a Thanksgiving dinner with a lot of stuffing and mashed potatoes, right? And it's like well known, we all laugh about it, right? You eat your big Thanksgiving dinner and then you fall asleep in the chair watching a football game, right? So when you don't eat, then you have more energy. And this is, we keep bringing this back to ourselves, the adaptive mechanism. It's part of our way of surviving, right? If you don't have food, you got to go and get some. You're not going to get it sitting in a chair falling asleep watching a football game. That isn't going to get you food. So we have to be energetic. Who here gets that 3 o'clock in the afternoon slump because after they had lunch, right? That's like, you know, that's one of the reasons why a lot of people do better if they have minimal lunch. Really, they have much more energy in the afternoon. I personally have found that to be the case. We don't need to eat not only do we not want to eat every day a lot of food, but we certainly don't want to eat every 2 hours. Remember when that became popular? You have to eat every 2 hours to keep your blood sugar up. Can you imagine, could Homo sapiens have survived as a species if we had to feed every 2 hours to function? I mean, is that totally absurd? So eating fewer meals of the day, even like 2, but getting all your nutrition is much better than feeding all the time. If you want someone to gain weight, like they're ill, then you want to feed them all the time. When you're looking for more metabolic homeostasis and you don't want to gain weight, then you do not want to feed all the time. Because it is very true, when you eat is just as important as what you eat, right? So we definitely want to stop eating all the time. So it turned out that when you fast, you activate the sensory, when you're not eating, right, you activate the pathways that lead to cellular regeneration, and when you eat, those nutrient-sensing pathways for glucose and protein will make you pro-growth and pro-aging. And this is not really the feature of my talk, and we can talk about it in the panel, is what happens long-term in terms of these pro-growth and pro-aging factors if you eat high protein all the time. Because you can think of high protein as high pro-aging. And a lot of people who become muscle builders, they have wonderful, beautiful muscles and all, they often do not have the longest lifespans, but they sure look good. They make the cover of Muscle Man magazine. So how long can humans actually live without food? 10 days? No, not even close. So humans can live without food for quite a long time. Almost anyone can live without food. Of course, they have to have water for 60 days. There are some people that can live for 6 months. Who has ever heard of this? This was a true story where it does have a sad ending, but there was a couple that made some stupid decision to take a shortcut through a small, like, dirt road when they were like in sort of a rural area in the middle of winter and got stuck in a snowstorm, and no one knew where they were, and they had like 3 food bars or something to last them through the entire winter. And the husband went out to try to find help and was lost and died out there in the wilderness. The wife stayed in the car and just hunkered down in the car, was there for over 2 months, had like 2 bars, and came out perfectly healthy because she ate the snow. So there are many cases of survival where people had very little to eat. We are adaptive, hugely adaptive to lack of food. Okay, that's just how we evolved. That's how we became a species that did not die off.
That show Naked and Afraid, they don't eat for 21 days. I mean, nobody ever catches any food.
I actually,
Every single one of them, right?
I actually have not seen that show, but I have heard of it. Is that on cable?
I think it's National Geographic.
Yeah, I think it is, yeah.
Oh, well, this is really fun. Yeah. So it turns out that when they gave little food and kind of semi-starved them, obviously not to death, bacteria, yeast, worms, remember we have conserved genes like them, they all lived longer. Food is good, but moderation is key. So it turns out, now if we go back to the mouse model, go to the mouse, mice are great for study. It turns out that we rejuvenated when we did some degree of fasting, their immune system, their lymphocytes went up. In addition, in the mice, their cancer rates went way down. So it turns out that humans love to eat. Okay, let's take a vote. Who loves to eat? Who loves to not eat? All right, so we agree. We love to eat. That's unanimous, of course. So fasting for a certain period of time is healthy. At the Longevity Institute at USC, which I have an affiliation with Professor Longo, who's done a lot of the research on fasting and types of diet and protein and these different pathways for signaling, it turns out that there is a sweet spot for not eating. So even though humans can live for long periods of time without food, that isn't necessarily what we're looking for, right? We're not looking that we all look like we just got out of a concentration camp, but we're alive, okay? So it turns out like in everything, there is a sweet spot. And this is my analogy, because I always think of, like sort of put it into simplistic terms for me. So say someone is not getting food, and it's like 3 days. Their body says, okay, well, let's say 1 day. The body says, I'm lazy. I didn't get food today. It'll probably come in tomorrow. And then 2 days, it's like, I don't know, there's no food here, but maybe sort of towards the end of day 2, but certainly by day 3, it's like, we really have no food. So mobilize the troops, because it's now or never. Because I have a window of time when I still can have energy. I'm not in a fatigue state. I can still mobilize my own stores of fat and such to go out there and find food. So you get energized. So all kinds of different adaptive mechanisms in the body come into play. You're going to get smarter. You're going to get rid of crappy cells that are taking up nutrients that you need for healthy cells. You're going to take the healthy cells and rejuvenate them and recycle proteins and fats into new structures through the lysosomes. I call it the recycle bin, okay? So you're going to reduce inflammation, insulin resistance. You're going to improve your autonomic system's function. You're going to do everything to be in survival mode. And now you're going to go out. You're not in survival mode like what happens. We talked about like low free T3. That's not here. This is like high free T3. You want to be smart. You want to have brain function. You want to go out. It's only that these other like slow your metabolism kinds of things go into play when you've been fasting for more than at least 10 days, because then you're into just pure survival mode. Then you're waiting for someone to come and rescue you. Okay, the first few days of fasting, you're going to go and solve your own problems. You're going to go find your own food. So that's what happens. You're going to go find your own food, and you're going to get energized. You're going to burn your belly fat first. You're going to increase brain-derived neurotrophic factor and get smarter. You're going to lower HSCRP, and I'll show you all these slides one after another. All the things that you want, lower inflammation, better glucose metabolism, everything that makes you healthier is going to come into play, because you are going to go out there, find food, and you're going to survive. You're not into hunker down mode, someone's going to come and save me. You're in there, the mode of I'm going to save myself. And this is what you want. But you don't necessarily want to really fast, because the sweet spot for fasting to get this effect is 4 days. And who has not eaten for 4 days in a row? I can't say I ever have. So what they found at the Longevity Institute at USC is that you can do this by eating a diet for 5 days that flies under the radar of mTOR. So your body gets the nutrients and you get the joy of eating, but your body registers it as a fast. So you eat for 5 days to get the benefits of a 4-day water fast. And that is the sweet spot for regenerating and stimulating all these processes. And the thing I haven't mentioned yet, which I'll show you this slide, is that once you get out to 3 days of fasting, the body starts to prepare for what? Regeneration of stem cells and stimulation of stem cells. So at the end of this process, many organs in the body will shrink. And the reason they're shrinking is because crappy cells have killed themselves. And then they regrow in the refeeding time. And that's because stem cells are stimulated and these organs are actually regenerating. How amazing is that? So they have this fasting, what they call a fasting mimicking diet. It really went viral back in July of 2015. And you can see over here in the mouse model, when they did this study using the fasting mimicking diet, they had less fat, less cancer, less inflammation. Their immune systems regenerated, better cognitive performance when the mice ran through mazes. The mice lived considerably longer. In humans, we don't have such outcomes data because we're not going to can't do the study for years, but they have markers. And so all the markers showed markers for lower diabetes risk, cardiovascular disease, cancer, and aging. All the markers that they measured improved. So this was the clinical trial with 100 people. And as you can see, and I hope you all get these slides, right? Everyone gets the slide. If you don't, you can get them from me. Okay, I'll give you these slides, anyone who wants them, so you don't have to worry. This shows you all the different parameters that they measured, and everything went in the right direction with their 5-day fasting mimicking diet. And you can do a lot of this by fasting for 4 days, but you will burn some neural tissue, you will lose some muscle. In their study, because you still had some food coming in, but under the radar, sort of stealth food, they maintained lean body mass and neural tissue. So you don't get the negatives of true fasting. And also, go try to get your patients to not eat for 4 days, for several months in a row. That you're gonna have a low success rate, which this gives you a high success rate when you do it with real food. And so basically, with the mice model, if we go back to the mice, they had the white cells increase from the stem cells, they lived longer, they had less cancer, they improved cognition, the mice ran through their little mazes so much better, they had neuroregeneration. They did a study in conjunction with Germany. Is that 5 minutes?
3 minutes.
Oh, okay, thanks. I sat on my glasses yesterday, so they're kind of lopsided. So anyway, they did a study with people in Germany, with a group there. And in the mouse model, this is beyond amazing. They regenerated myelin sheath. They actually regenerated. And in the humans, they had significant improvement, and it was very short term. So for autoimmune diseases, this is extraordinarily exciting. Once more, they actually regenerated neural tissue. Pretty amazing. So basically, this is from the human studies. All the parameters like fasting blood sugar improved. IGF, a lot of people think you want to have a lot of IGF. When you're a middle-aged adult, you do not want a lot of IGF. That's proliferative, pro-aging. So that went down. This is HSCRP went down. The stem cells, circulating stem cells went up. Who has to go to Europe to get stem cells for like thousands of dollars? You can rejuvenate from within. So basically, what is happening? So as we age, we tend to get more diseases. We tend to get cancer, cardiovascular disease. If you fast, but just for that sweet spot, just a few days, and you do it every month until you get to where you want to be in terms of your weight, your metabolic profile, and then just do it maybe 4 times a year. That's all you need to do to help keep these signals in the right balance. You can actually start to reverse this aging process. Oops. So once more, in the human trials, all the things went in the right direction. And here, once again, after you're out with fasting for just like about 3 days, the stem cells are primed for regenerating. Okay, guys, who is going to fund my magic potion? Who thinks that humans everywhere would benefit from my product. Great. And guess what? It's all within you. You have the power to make this happen for yourselves and for your patients by harnessing these intrinsic rejuvenative mechanisms and processes that our bodies evolved to have if we just go with our ancestral functions. And thank you so much.
So how do we do it?
Tell us what it is. Okay, so this is CME. Okay, talk to me at the break.
No.
No.
Everybody wants to know.
Okay, is it
Maybe
okay?
we can include it in a panel?
Is it okay?
Yeah, but on the panel, I suppose that makes sense.
Okay, so as long I just didn't want to help, I'm blinded. Okay, okay. So since it was brought up, I started out. I was selected. I sort of won the lottery. I was interviewed, and I went through a whole selection process to work with the Longevity Institute. And I met with Professor Longo, and this goes back a couple of years now. My office got selected as the first site to actually use for studying it. Dr. Longo's product, which he developed in conjunction with USC, as a fasting mimicking diet, as a commercial product. As you know, many universities now combine entrepreneurship with research. And so that's what they did. And I got selected to be the first office site to actually use their fasting mimicking diet. So I used it with my patients for the first year and gave them a lot of feedback, not on efficacy, but on palatability and usability. And so based on my feedback, they modified a lot of the product. They had kale chips, which some people disliked, so they modified them into kale crackers, and they added different soups. So what they came up with was a 5-day diet that is now marketed just for a few months. They came out as actually a company, and so it's an actual 5-day fasting mimicking diet, and it comes with boxes, 5 days that you eat. And you eat everything in each box for each of the days. And it comes with, on day 1, it's about 1,100 calories. It has 2 like nut bars, which are really delicious. I like them. A lot of people want them, so they're probably going to keep manufacturing them so that people can just use them if they wish to, like as a breakfast. And a soup for lunch, a soup for dinner, and then I call them doodads, extra stuff. So some days it's like olives, some days it is kale crackers, and they have a little Cocoa Crisp. And what this is, on the other days, it's a little under 800 calories. So it's not a starvation diet. There's actually quite a bit to eat that almost everyone, except people who came from a terrible, terrible diet, people who ate nothing but French fries, hamburgers, pizza, and pasta, they need a little help because they do not go into lipolysis very well. They just don't, their bodies are, it's like rusty. It's how they're not good at switching over to fat burning. So we have to work with those people ahead of time and sort of detox, I call it detox, but actually Professor Longo hates that word, but so I call it, you're detoxing them off of horrible Western conventional diets, right? And so they take these 5 boxes, they eat them every day, each box, and that will give you the same impact in a much easier to manage way as if you truly water fasted for 4 days. And they recommend that you do this, I call it like a loading dose. You do it every month for 3 months in a row, and then depending on your goals, you could do it every 3 months. That's where I'm at. I've done it like 7 times now myself. And you know, it's interesting, people have said, this is obviously anecdotal, that I look younger. I feel younger, this is me, I feel like I can get by on less sleep, but not that that's my goal, but sometimes that's my reality. And I never get that afternoon tired slump anymore, and I always feel energized, but I also have the warrior gene, so who knows. But basically, I love it myself, and I have patients who now, you know, are really hooked on it because they feel so much better. A lot of people feel like their brain feels clear like that brain fog kind of goes away. And I found that it's not marketed as a weight loss product, but there are a lot of people that lose quite a bit of weight. But the thing about this is that if your blood sugar, if all your markers are good, they're not going to get lower. You go to the sweet spot. So if you're already healthy, it will only make you have more rejuvenative properties, like stimulate stem cells, kill off potential cancer cells, and so on. But it's not going to lower you to make you hypoglycemic or anything like that, or like you'll have low blood pressure or anything like hypertensive. It just gets you to that normal spot. So typically, when I do it, I lose like 2 pounds, but other people have lost 10 pounds. So you kind of lose what you need to lose to a large degree. What they found in their study with the 100 people is that after they stopped it, even 6 months out after they hadn't done it, the vast majority of the weight loss was maintained. And in the study, they did not have them do any sort of special diet. So many of them went back to their conventional crappy diets, and they still maintained most of the weight loss. So it's very encouraging that it started these processes and it maintains it. That's why once you get started, you don't have to do it every month. If someone is pre-diabetic or hypertensive, you would probably want to continue it until they get to their goal. And there are people that can do it even more often. If there's someone really is motivated, you could even do it twice a month. But the standard is to do it for the 5 days once a month. Some people, after they do it, they say, can I keep going? Because I'm doing so well. You probably could do 2 sets of 5 days back to back. I've spoken with Professor Longo. If you're motivated and healthy, you could do 2 back to back, but not too many people want to do that. Most people are really excited when they get to eat their own food again, but the day 6 is like a transition day after day 5. So you do eat your own food, but they do recommend that you go lightly. If you look at the composition of the fasting mimicking diet, it's very low in protein and carbs. And for those of you who love ketogenic diets, it's predominantly fat, okay? And it will put you in ketosis on the end of day 2 into day 3, but this is short-term ketosis. Professor Longo is not an advocate of the ketogenic diet for the vast majority of people. There are exceptions. He is an advocate for adults, not elderly. Once you get 65 and older, everything changes and that you tend to you do better if you eat higher animal protein. But his belief is that, and obviously based on science, that you're best served as a middle age, like from age 22 to like age 65, if you eat predominantly a low protein diet in terms of animal protein. But you can eat plenty of plant-based protein. But it's the animal-based protein that he feels is the most pro-aging, proliferative. So he's more of a plant-based diet person, and that is my leanings as well. But I do recognize, as we all do, that humans are amazing, adaptable creatures and can eat many different types of diets. And a lot of what he has talked to me, because I've had the great fortune to actually spend some time talking to him, is that it's really important to remember that our microbiome is inherited. So we adapt and our microbiome adapts, our gut bacteria. So you try to eat along the lines of your heritage, your tradition. So to eat in line with what your great-grandparents ate, because that's the lineage of your gut microbiome. So if you're Inuit, you may want to eat their diet. But if you're Western or Eastern European, you may want to eat that diet, because that's how your microbiome adapted. And you can make alterations because we are very adaptable, but that's probably your best vision of what you might want to eat. So if you are interested in learning more about the fasting mimicking diet that was developed at USC under the directorship of Professor Longo at the Longevity Institute, please come in and talk to me, because we are doing some special education programs and a dinner for people who would like to be more involved and actually utilize this for themselves, their family, or their patients.
Have you done this at all? I'm just on the website looking at it, and it's a bunch of packaged food that I would never eat or recommend to my patients. So have you ever done this dietary composition, having people eat real food?
Okay, so that's a good point. Now, you're right in that obviously it's somewhat processed. It's what they call minimally processed. There's no preservatives and that sort of thing involved in their food. So it's like dehydrated, but it's not like added chemicals. And it's from organic based sources, and they get like their olives are from Spain. They really went out of their way to find excellent sources for their food. Now, can you do this just by using like regular food? You can try. You will have no scientific basis, because it would be difficult to make it exactly the same. And the data, of course, the scientific data is published and studied. If someone, you will always get benefit by doing some form of fasting. But if you don't do their program, if you do it on your own, you may or may not, we don't know, you may or may not fly under the radar of mTOR detection.
Yeah, I was just asking.
So, we didn't talk about it, but we can in the panel, like the benefits of the 5-2, and you will, one of the things that was the most outstanding and significant and different, depending on what you're looking for, if you do the actual fasting mimicking diet with the product that they researched for, oh, by the way, this is research going on for over 20 years to develop this, that this was the way that they actually stimulated stem cells. Because you can lose weight with any fasting program, but you will not stimulate your stem cells to rejuvenate your organs. So it depends on what your goals are.
Okay, so, should we start the panel discussion, I suppose? Is that what-
Yeah, I think we already started.
But I'm the only panel. Come on, panel.
No.
So.